It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood. It's a beautiful day for neighbor. And Mike's not here. Mike's not here. That means Jacob gets to swear and gets to do a lot of things that he doesn't normally get to do. I mean, I could already... Welcome to this episode of Mike's Not the F Here. I'm your host, JJ Benks, and welcome to this very special episode of Tangent Kings. Did I mention Mike's not here? Well, hello there. Welcome to this very episode of Tangent Kings. Hi, folks. It's your boy, JJ Benks. Mike has the night off. And because of this, we've got a very special episode of Tangent Kings, brought to you by the biggest Tangent King of all, me, JJ Benks. And as a substitute for our friend Mike, I have very graciously asked a friend to step in. So without further ado, please give a round of applause and a warm welcome. 1 second, we're gonna pause this music. Very warm welcome to our friend, Mr. Reich Wazowski. Say hi, Reich! Hello, everyone! Wow, you look so much like Mike, Reich. You seem like are you a Vikings fan, Reich? Yeah, I wish they win the Super Bowl. Okay, this is a bit stupid as... So no, anyway, jokes aside, I had this whole bit planned out where I was just going to be like, oh yeah, we'll just have the sock puppet talking the whole time and I'll do a stand-in for Mike. But at like 5 seconds into the bit, I'm like, this thing is stupid as... So this evening, we're gonna take a load off. We're gonna relax. We're gonna have a good time, and we're gonna sip this very lovely glass chalice of Jameson Irish whiskey, triple distilled, and it's actually my first time having it. I've had a couple sips already, but we're gonna have a couple sips now. Our goal is to finish this. It's about the equivalent of a shot. We're going to have some of this, and we're going to see how it goes. So, wish me luck. It's whiskey, obviously, so it's strong, but it's not bad. I got some from the nearby my house. They built a new... What would you call it? It's a Coburn's. They just built a Coburn's around here, and there's a new liquor store, and so I was like, well, okay, let's get a couple things. So we got some mead. And I said, well, I really want some Irish whiskey, which I've never bought before. Never bought before. And I don't think I've had Jameson. I never had some JMO straight up. So, yeah, no, got some of that. And I'm going to adjust this a little bit more here. There we go. So you can see my face. Yeah, so got some JMO, and I've been sipping on it, and it's been absolutely fantastic. So this evening, I don't have any show notes set up. Mike usually is the one that writes that stuff. He's usually the one that writes the show notes and has our show all organized and ready to go. And then, as you guys know the format already, it's he kind of poses a question and posts a thought, and then I kind of give my thoughts on it, and then kind of bookend the thought, and then he kind of gives his thoughts, and we kind of do this whole like roundabout tangent over it, obviously. But yeah, tonight I was thinking about just kind of ad-libbing it and kind of talking about what comes to mind and bringing up what kind of thoughts that may come across. So Mike's doing fine. He just needed a evening off. We've been getting some really excellent feedback. He's doing all right. But one thing I wanted to touch on was we've been actually getting some very excellent feedback from our Discord servers that me and Mike are a part of, and everybody's been very much liking the show quite a bit. Shout outs to Gigglebug, obviously, and Spike, Monsieur Brother, and everybody else, and Eli, and everyone on the Discord server from watching it. Again, just want you guys to know how much I personally deeply appreciate it. It's doing this. I mean, full transparency too. It's doing a podcast is new to me, and doing it sort of where you got your thoughts, you got really deep thoughts. Not that I'm saying I'm a great big like I'm the smartest person ever, but like when I kind of discuss something, I kind of pull it out from like a really core part of my being, and it's personal for me. It's very personal. A lot of these thoughts that I've put out in the podcast so far, we're only at episode 5 or 6, I think. They've been very personal to me, and I've never shared them, and it's scary sharing what you actually think about a lot of things. It's fun, it's invigorating, but it's scary. I know that as we grow as a show and as we learn how to do not only our format better, but we we expand it and we keep shooting, we're going to get a lot more attention, even if it's small scale, large scale, whatever. We're going to get more attention, and I know that we're going to be getting a lot more feedback from a lot of different, for example, sources. And it's hard. It's hard kind of putting yourself out there, especially on the internet, when it's easy to kind of read things and kind of take it personally and take it really hard when maybe, for example, you talk to a person like someone in person and gives you feedback and you're like, oh, see, that actually makes sense, versus like, you did a comedy bit or something, or you did like a joke, or you're just, you're tipsy, you're half drunk, and you're as comedic relief, and it's like, oh, spur of the moment, let's just ingest or pretend to ingest this almost fist size sphere of Amazonite. Let's just ingest it and see what the joke is, because you're having a blast. It's like, it's fun. You enjoy shooting it, but it's also like, it's hard and it's scary kind of putting yourself out there for people to watch and then give you feedback on. So maybe it's the process of developing a thick skin. Maybe it's not, but it's been so far in the show. It has been a lot of fun. It's been very rewarding, but kind of it's also kind of keeping the right frame of mind and not like, seeing everyone is out to get you. I mean, there are times when it really does seem like that. I know that for content creators who've been around, for example, for a long time, um, on YouTube specifically, I mean, people talk, and if you read the comments, a lot of them are very negative or just critical, or they want to oversimplify you, or take something you said, which might have been a more deeper, richer thought, and people want to mischaracterize you and paint you out to be like, oh, you're a white supremacist because you believe in IQ, right? Or, oh, you must be this because you're this. It's like, it's and I get it, it's the internet, but it's hard, because I mean, it's a scary time, because we all know that there's a hate mob out there that, if not just if you piss them off, because it's really easy to piss them off, but like the fanatics, right? The social justice warriors, the communists, the people out there that want to just scream, like people, most like the average person on Twitter, just cancerous, toxic, abusive people that just want to scream and just put as much pain in your direction as they possibly can and try to make themselves out to be very superior. Putting yourself out there for not just a show format, but just in general, it's like you kind of have that floating around in your head. I certainly do, and it's kind of like, it's scary. It's scary. Um, I mean, just for example, doing more comedy style shows. When you're doing these kinds of shows, I mean, it's obviously for entertainment, and we're small scale right now. But I kind of think of the words of Jerry Seinfeld, for example, where he mentioned that this is like 4, 5, 6 years ago, where he just wouldn't tour at college campuses anymore because everyone would be so offended. And it's kind of developing that thick skin to be able to get up in front of people that are going to mischaracterize you, or potentially mischaracterize you, or you are at their mercy to be dissected and ripped apart and digested. It's hard. I mean, I think of the words of Teddy Roosevelt, just for example, where he mentioned that there's the person in the ring, right? There's the person in the ring, and then there's the critic that they just, and I'm paraphrasing to mind you, but where it's like, don't criticize the person in the ring because he's actually doing the work. The critics don't matter. There's one person, one entrepreneur I look up to who mentioned that criticism gets a lot easier to realize. Criticism gets a lot easier to take when you realize that the only people that aren't criticized are the people that don't take risks, and that helps. That having that particular quote in your mind really helps as you kind of venture out and do things that may or may not pan out well for you. I mean, to be completely honest with you, I there's a fear of being doxxed, right? I don't know what are, to be completely honest with you, yeah, what's our channel going to look like over the next several years? What's our show going to look like over the next few years? Hopefully it gets better. I'm sticking around for it for the long haul. I'm not dumping it when it gets hard. We'll keep going, but because I'm in love with this format. It's a lot of fun just being able to kind of give your thoughts and put them out there, not just in front of a camera, obviously, but just like in front of you guys, and then hearing your thoughts. Especially just for example, like hearing all the fantastic feedback we got from last week was just like, thanks. I mean, sir, genuinely, thank you for watching. But yeah, so I wanted to cover that, in whatever time that I have for that matter. But, and like I said, all this is off the cuff, is kind of just as it comes to me. But so a lot of it's figuring it out as we go. I think I've always been kind of the guy that I want to just go out and try it. Like, got enough information, let's go out and try it and let's see how it looks, and then kind of just get a taste of the thing, right? Like, let's sample this dish. Do I want more of it? Do I want less of it? A lot of times it's like you try it and you're like, I don't want this, and you go on to the next thing. But that's one thing I've always kind of liked about myself, is the willingness to go try it and see if it's a good fit. More often than not, you find out a lot of things aren't a good fit. Fortunately, Jameson is not one of those, which this is probably my not third glass this evening, but the third glass I've had out of the bottle this week, and I've liked it a lot. It's not a full glass, mind you, like just little half shot size tastes, but it's good stuff. That's actually pretty good timing. But I wanted to kind of share some of my thoughts on. I want to talk a little bit about this evening. This is, like I said, this is coming to my mind. One of the things I wanted to discuss this evening a little bit were my thoughts on fiction. I wanted to talk a little bit about the value of storytelling in fiction. I was listening to a podcast earlier, or correction, it was a YouTube video, where one person was talking about, specifically it was a Stossel segment on YouTube, talking about, I believe it was Ayn Rand of all people. If you're not familiar with Ayn Rand, she is a famous / infamous novelist, depending on who you ask, who wrote very, what would you say, wrote about she's the author people love to hate. She's the author, she wrote, I believe it was 60 years ago, the book Atlas Shrugged, which off the top of my head, I believe it's either Atlas Shrugged or The Fountainhead, that was 12,000 words. So there's these great big books talking about not just the evils of just government in general, but also the value of selfishness, that you're conditioned your whole life to think altruism is the only way. Think about everyone else and their needs. But as you start to, like, everyone else is more important than me, you start to think that, which I don't know if that's necessarily true or not. I'm kind of sorting a lot of like what my own thoughts about it myself. I need to read some of her. But she talked about the virtue of selfishness, that I'm just as valuable as anyone else, and it's okay to value myself and take care of my own needs, is kind of one of the points among many she would make in her books. And so Sasa was talking about Ayn Rand, and talking about like how she's been viewed and how she's been, even to this day, like very heavily demonized. And he mentioned that, or one of the people he had on one of his segments on his channel, he mentioned that they had said, like, the facts are important, and facts in an objective way are more important than fiction, but fiction is a way of teaching. Fiction is a way of not just storytelling. Fiction is a way of helping someone understand something and learn it. You could take, for example, in the case of Jordan Peterson, for example, he's mentioned similar things about mythology in the world, is that, just for example, the Greek mythology, a lot of this is arranged, or these Greek myth stories and characters are arranged in such a way, where how do you put it? They're arranged in such a way where they're designed not only to give you like a framework of a worldview, they're also trying to teach you psychological principles as well as life principles. So they're trying to impart knowledge, and not just like random stories about how such and such God put such and such seed into such and such person. It's not something like as colorful as that, mind you. It's there, but that's not the point of it. And certainly in the case of Peterson, he was contending that these myths are really important because in a way they're more real than life itself. These stories, right? And he's mentioned that a little bit, just for example, with biblical myths, right? And biblical myths, not in like a facetious sense of just like, oh, they're fables, they're stories. It's like, well, they're something bigger than that, right? And this is Peterson who said they were myths, mind you, or just was mentioning in the context of like these meta tales, like these archetypes that we tell about people and men and women and how people have lived through the ages and like what virtue is. It's imparting a worldview. I think of, I believe it was a book by Richard Smith, who, if you're more than likely not familiar with him, he was just passed away this past week, or about 2 weeks ago, I should say. He and his wife Connie Richard Smith, they were missionaries to some forgotten tribes or not forgotten tribes, isolated tribes in South America. And they had come and they not only had brought the Bible to a lot of these people, they also had taught them a lot of, they had to get to know them. They had to get to know the language, and so that in them learning their own culture, the tribes were able to learn about them. And one of the things Richard had pointed out when he was there with his wife was that how this particular tribe taught things was their language had words for in correspondence to things that were relevant and important to them. So, for example, grass is a lot more important to this tribe than say flowers. Like they only had one word for flower, but they had many words for different types of grass because grass was more useful. You use it as building materials, and you use it as in construction for certain types of crafts as well. So it's more useful in that regard. I think they only had like, just for example as well, they only had one word for the word blue or something like that. Like grass was blue. It's like it was this sort of an all encompassing color where you had green and blues, and that was all kind of under this word of their word for blue. But what Richard had mentioned was that the encompassing thing was that they taught the language and they taught in the framework of stories. And Richard had pointed it out in his book on battling dark forces that it was a very effective, pragmatic, and effective way of giving sort of a holistic view of the world. And that's what a story can do. That's what storytelling can do. That's what fiction can do. It's taking all this complicated mess of the world and what life is and seems like, right? It simplifies in ways that are very easy to grasp and easy to follow and then it formats it in a way where it's like it all kind of makes sense. It's like, for example, like you read history and sometimes it kind of can feel very disjointed, or how is this relevant to me, or how is this important, or how do you look at history? There's so much information out there. Having a guiding mind, for example, having a historian's guiding mind, like, got people like Herodotus, for example, in the 8th century BC, who would write about the Persians. Actually, correction, I think it was the 5th century BC, if I recall correctly. But Herodotus wrote about the Persians and the Greeks. Really famous author, fantastic read, his book, Histories. But Herodotus kind of told this narrative of winding his way through, the people of not just the Middle East, for example, when the Persian Empire was around, the ancient Iranians, but also the Greek states, and how they kind of gotten tied into the conflicts that they had with each other, and how the Persian army came about invading the Greek states, and Battle of Marathon. All this kind of information, Herodotus ties it all through a consistent, like a thread, a narrative, right? And that's what storytellers in general do. Not that they're making it up. I mean, certainly in context of fiction, yes, but it's in a way of taking you almost with your mind out of the burdens of reality, just for example, and putting it in a hypothetical where you don't have all this emotion attached. Like you've got all this emotion attached to all these pieces of everything in reality, and they mean very specific things. But when you hop into fiction, you're able to kind of start from fresh to some degree. In a way, it's like returning to childhood to some degree, if you kind of think about it. You're not tied up in all these expectations of reality. You're tied up in a world where there's more hypotheticals, where there's things to explore, but more specifically, you can distill the most important things in life and just put it into that narrative, right? And you're able to tell a much more, like I said, that thread, that narrative of a beginning, middle, and end. And, history is obviously one big story, mind you, but you need that helping hand. You need someone to guide you as you're learning about all this stuff. G.K. Chesterton, which, bingo, G.K. Chesterton said that fiction, he said, literature is a luxury, fiction is a necessity. And I love that quote so much. I wrote it on a piece of paper and then I stuck it to my wall. And I think about that all the time of why is it so important? Because I've always noticed when I watch a cartoon, for example, or watch not just a nonfiction cartoon, but like an actual cartoon, like maybe sometimes anime, sometimes not, really like American cartooning, but you watch either that or you watch a play or you watch a film or you read a book, especially reading books, which are just fantastic. You're reading this stuff or you're engaging with this stuff and you're following this whole thread of this story, and it draws something out of you that I think, certainly speaking from personal experience, it draws something out of me that nonfiction tends to not, unless it's written in a particular way. If the nonfiction is written just like a story, then you can follow it really easily. Other times it's like I don't want to read a textbook. I don't want to read a book like an engineer's instruction manual. Not to bash those things, but speaking as a creative type myself, it's hard to engage with that kind of stuff. Where fiction is, like I said, fiction is very engaging. And I think there's something universal about it, about universal human experience that we all kind of have over the course of our lives that fiction seems to be able to almost tap into. You got something, for example, you take the Lord of the Rings films, which, if you haven't seen them, when you get a chance to see them, they are treats. Like, you're in for a treat if you've never seen all three of the extended films of Lord of the Rings. It's a joyride. It's just so fantastic to watch. And you get into, like, just for example, like, you get into these epic narratives that you get so invested in the story where you start not only seeing yourself in the role of the character, but you also empathize with the characters and you feel like you're right there with them as they're, in the case of Frodo, taking the ring to Mordor, right, to battle with the forces of evil, where they're able to pull something out of you that you maybe didn't even know about yourself. When you're reading a piece of literature or fiction and it pulls something out of you, or like, aha, you see, that's the thing that I always thought was there, or I kind of intuitively knew but didn't have words for, and you just put words to it. There's a passage, I think, in Proverbs where Solomon had said, for example, that a wise man is, I'm going to take this pipe, for example. A wise man is like, almost like a ladle, and you're reaching really, really deep out down into the well, and it's pulling out these really, really deep waters, and the waters are the human heart, of like reaching down and pulling out something deep that you always kind of knew was true, and someone, like I just said, someone put words to it, or someone's able to, aha, you see, that distills the knowledge that I've had in a way that makes sense. I've just, for example, watching Jordan Peterson lectures, there have been a lot of things he said that's like, oh, that's why the way the world is, or that makes perfect sense, or thank you for stating something so plainly obvious that I don't know why we're questioning this as a society right now, or questioning just something fundamental like, why do we breathe oxygen, right? Thank you for pointing out why this is the way it is. Like, why is the world so effed up? Thank you for explaining, or that's why people act that way, or that's why people act that way. So I'm just, with all this stuff, I'm trying not to ramble, but what I'm just mentioning with all this stuff here is that there's something almost like a magic to storytelling and fiction that just does these things to people, where it's like it makes you come alive. And I think that's kind of the key component of it, is it's almost like crafted pretending, or like create like constructive imagination, where you're almost like, if you can see, like in the case of Ender's Game, I mean, Orson Scott Card does a fantastic job of not only putting you in the role of the main character Ender, but also making it feel like, well, so this is maybe what it feels like to be a gifted person, or someone who's like a genius, right? This is what it feels like, and if Ender could do it, I can do it, right? Or if I can visualize myself of that thing happening, it can happen. And it's, I think that's where the power of it really comes in, is that it taps into that imagination center of your mind, where, what if? Because life isn't, speaking from personal experience, it's not so much your limitations or the way the world is that's important right now. That's not it. It's how you envision the world, how you envision yourself, what you visualize. It's, you feel that this is what's going to happen, and it starts not just to manifest, right? But that kind of just happens in general. It's like, to build something, you have to have it in your mind's eye first, and then once you kind of start, it kind of gets fed into your brain over and over again. It starts to kind of become a part of your of the way you think, of the way your system operates. Like if you keep feeding, that's the beauty of the mind, is that it really genuinely does become what it is fed. I think Tony J. Schwartz, who wrote, I think it was Trump's Art of the Deal, many years ago, he ghost wrote it. He said the same thing. It's like the mind really is what it is fed. And I've certainly noticed that as well, coming from, an abusive background, abusive childhood, that when you kind of fixate on the trauma, it makes it worse. It makes it like, how do you function out of this stuff, right? Versus, I can't get out of this. Versus like when you get the healing and then you can feel, it's like, okay, all the weeds, all the gunk, all the garbage, all the rot is gone. Now you can fixate on building something new, and you're not having something constantly ripping in your mind, pulling you back. It's, let's build something new. Right? And that's that imagination center that I was talking about. So you got all these pieces in play that it really, with fiction, it it's that part of the brain where it kind of seems to tap into. So I think I kind of made that point pretty well. I'm sure it's understood. I'm trying, like I said, I'm trying not to repeat myself, but it's, I'm a verbal processor, so, and I'm sure you guys probably know that by now. So it's kind of the way I am. But maybe maybe in the future I'll have it all written out, and then I could just present an essay in like 5 minutes instead of like in the time it took to kind of present that idea. But I'm like I said, I'm just trying to get something across as best I can, certainly in that regard. But there's that. There's fiction where, like I said, it just, I guess the best way of putting it is just makes you come alive, and if you kind of gain knowledge from doing that, um, you know, enjoy the way you enjoy gaining knowledge. So right now we're about at the 23-minute mark. This is usually where Mike would step in, and I would interject Mr. Sock Puppet and say, "Well, you see, this is what I think. This blah 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 blah." Mike doesn't sound like that, but you have that, or he, sorry, he would come in and ask, like, "Let's go on to the next topic, and let's go on to this." Like, you're right, Mike. Let's go from talking about this thing to go on to the next thing. Let's do that. I wish I packed a pipe before I started shooting, but we're blank deep right now, so we're committed. So, but these are the kind of discussions we would have at my literature club. Is I don't know what is it that, in history you look to these famous people, these not just captains of industry, right? Not just these captains of industry, but you've got these people that are these figureheads, these great men, these great women who seem to step out and make so much change in the world and transform so much of the planet. Sometimes good for bad, whatever it is, but good or evil. But people they transform everything around them, and you remember them, and you also remember these fictional characters too. Like, that's what I think is, like, just for example, the power of stuff like Star Wars, right? Luke Skywalker is sort of like your sci-fi skin of a, not just a knight in shining armor, but he's also the hero's journey, and he just comes across so endearing because you feel like you're him in the films. You really can feel like you're in the guy's role or in his shoes, or like Han Solo. It's like these characters are archetypes, but you still kind of, because they're archetypes, there's a reason why they're archetypes. They've been around for so long, and because you can fit your, own personality or who you are in them. And it's cool stuff. It's really cool stuff. Especially like what's really fun when you're watching a film or a movie. It's like, hey, that's me, or I can see myself so much as that character. And I think that that's also kind of the power, not just the power of fiction, but it pulls at you in that regard too. And I think that, like I was saying earlier, that sort of constructive imagination, that's kind of a key component, how it feeds into that. I can see myself doing that. I can see myself doing this. I can see myself doing that. And it's, I think it's powerful for sure. But, why fictional characters stick with us for years and years afterwards. I have one of my friends in my writing club, Haley, love you, hon. Um, she mentions that one of her favorite characters in Mass Effect, for example, is Garrus Vakarian. If you're not familiar with Mass Effect, he's one of the alien characters that kind of sticks by you. He's sort of like your buddy cop bro dude. If you're the male character, if you're a female character, you have the option to romance him. But he's kind of like the cool customer, like, hey, Shepard, how's it going? He's kind of that cool, like, I got your back, everything's kind of chill, I'm awesome. He's a great character. He's an absolutely fantastic character. And when you play the games, you kind of get attached to not only people like Garrus, for example, but you get attached to these other characters, other personalities that not only the voice actors did a lot of work to clearly bring these characters alive, but visually they really, they're aliens, but they feel like real people, and you feel like, wow, that's a person there I can really get invested in. And same thing with stuff like sometimes with Star Trek, like you get attached to some of these characters, like Q from Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. Sorry, correction, he was made cameos in Deep Space Nine. He was primarily in a Next Generation, but Q, played by John Delancey, I think his name is, fantastic actor, and he's this sort of off the wall, spur of the moment, like, haha, I see I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to challenge everything that you stand for to see if you're really this person. He's that sort of character. He's sort of like the Next Generation's version of Loki from the Marvel films. He's a lot like that. He's in the vein of that archetype. And he's a very memorable, enjoyable character. Like the whole, I mean, what's fantastic about characters like Q, for example, is that they take over the room they're in. It's like, it's all about me. Yes. Give me your attention, folks. I'm going to, and then he's also a character where he can shape shift not only himself, but others around him, and the whole perception of the people of the room he's in. So it's like, yes, I'm God. And it's like sort of like walks in. It's like, hello, the stage is all mine, and it's all about me. And if anyone says otherwise, it's like, up, out the airlock with you. That's kind of how the character behaves, right? So he's very memorable. Or you've got characters like, I'll take, for example, an anime I really got into, Naruto. I really, really genuinely enjoy Naruto. I'm only on the first season of the show. I haven't watched it in a bit. What's like the character Naruto Uzumaki? He's somebody that like is sort of embodies that sense of hard grit, determination, and I'm going to be like, just for example, over the show, he says, I'm gonna be the next Hokage. I'm gonna be the next Hokage. This was like the tribal leader of the village, or the clan leader, I should say, of the ninja village. And there's this something inside, and the author put a lot of himself in it, in the character, because the author of Naruto wanted to be a manga artist. He wanted to be one of the best in the world, and he kept working on it for years and years and years. Tons of rejection, for like 10 years straight, and finally he just strikes up with Naruto, and then he just explodes. But there's that raw grit and determination that's going to carry you through it, and through it, and through it, until you kind of get what you want. That's Naruto, who he embodies, but also some of the supporting characters in the show too, like the very different characters. But on that point of sort of raw grit and determination, you just see, for example, in Naruto's author, it reminds me as well of a quote by the entrepreneur Gary Vaynerchuk. And Gary Vaynerchuk mentioned in an Instagram video, I saw it this week, and I'm so happy he posted this, was that Gary, you're a very successful entrepreneur, and you're really, really famous around the world, and everyone loves you. How do you deal with when you lose? And then he's got this, he's in a car, and I should post the link to this, but he's in the car, and then he says, with effing excitement, when I lose, winners lose a lot. A lot. And then that's the whole video. And so what he's getting across is that I know I'm a winner because I'm losing, because I keep losing until finally I win. And that's kind of what I've noticed, not only about successful people but entrepreneurs, is that people have this perception that, oh, they just instantly got successful and everything worked out for them. No, it's like this upward slope of like failure and failure and failure and failure and failure, but you keep going, you keep getting smacked in the face, getting grabbed by the back of your neck and just shoved in the ground and get the crap kicked out of you, and you keep getting up until you keep going. It's that determination, right? You love the climb up even if it's hard, and you keep going, you outlasting people till finally you get where you want to be. I was having a chat with my brother right before he left, and I didn't get to this, but I was kind of briefly touching on this, because we were talking about jobs and employment, and I was thinking about this, and I said, I think the reason why I've tried so many different things, just for example, is that I've been trying to find things I've liked and I've enjoyed long enough to stick with them for longer periods of time. It's not an avoidance, just for example, of having a career. It's not an avoidance of having a stable job or getting bored with it, because let's face it, I mean, that is honestly the case with a lot of these jobs I've had. They've been so unbelievably boring after 6 months to a year. I'm like, I'm sick of this. I can't make myself do this. The job is like, this boredom is like plaque on my soul. I just can't breathe in this. I got to try something else. And so I finally found something I really, really liked. And it's like, this is fantastic. And it's, you kind of get the sense with what I do for work right now. in sales. Like, this is something that I feel like I'm really intuitively good at, and it feels like something I was meant to do in a lot of ways. But the reason why I mention that is because it's like, if I want to be successful in sales, good job, because you enjoy it, because you'll keep sticking with it as you ride up there. If you hate the whole process of it, well, you're not going to stay with it for very long, and you're going to hate the ride up there, and it's not something you'll last on doing. But just by sheer enjoyment, you'll win by default because you haven't given up. So I just mentioned that because if you like what you're doing and you're enjoying the ride up, like I said, and that you like to lose, or that you can lose, right? And you don't give up, you're going to get there. Whatever the goal is, mind you, in terms of just not just general success, but just like achieving these bigger things that these great men of history have achieved, whatever it may be. You've got these people that have impacted the world by quite a bit. So you've got all those things in play. And I've been thinking about that lately, and because it kind of seems hard sometimes, right? Um, a lot. Me and one of my friends, one of my pub buddies, Devin and I, one of the things that we both have kind of struggled with over the years, that we have this really, really big, almost vision expectation of ourselves in our minds, and we don't live up to it, and so that kind of creates this lack of self-respect, and this lack of acceptance, and lack of um, not just respectability, but just like, oh man, I just want to get to this thing and be this thing that I envision myself to be, and you're not happy till you get there. It's hard. It's really hard. And Sam and I were talking, one of my friends, Sam, about the same thing. And yeah, it hits you hard. Even with as my friend's dad, uh, he had he said something similar. He said, like, I've just been trying to find for so much of my life this thing that I want, and he got married. He's like, I'll provide for us, but I just want to do something I like and really find meaning with. And finally, he did. He's a full-time fireman, but you kind of have to go on that journey until you find not only who you are and what your identity is, because you know wherever you go, there you are, right? But not just that, it's like you have to go out and find it, and then when you find it, you can kind of bring it back, and you can kind of build something out of it. And it's a nice feeling, kind of feeling like you have time to figure yourself out and figure out your life. But it's all this, like I said, like going from here to like all the way back to our earlier conversation about fiction. It's like, this is kind of how it all kind of ties together. It's this kind of great big envelope of all these kind of thoughts tying around, but it's good stuff. I had this whole it's funny, when I got home I had this whole comedic I was gonna do a bunch of comedy jokes, and then it kind of turned a little more serious tonight. But yeah, thanks for skipping out on the podcast, Mike. It's funny, what I should have done is just got a bunch of picture, like printed out a picture of just a bunch of swear words, like, you can't censor this one, Mike, F you! Just go around. Just go around and, like, just swear my butt off. And there's like, you can't censor all this stuff, Mike. You have to post it as it is. But it's good stuff. I think that's all I got. You know, I definitely can't. I can't do this without Mike. I need you, man. I need you, bud. But maybe I'll just have to prepare more to talk about. But that kind of is this whole kind of encompassing thing, and it's. I hope that if with you guys watching, that if any of this is just helpful, um, post a comment saying, hey, Benks, hey, appreciate what you said. I know you maybe haven't figured out your whole life yet, but that kind of helped me empathize with you, or your experience seems similar to mine, and thanks for just, being honest or something. If any of it's helpful, just drop a comment, obviously. But I kind of just, as I get older, I think about the claw hand, boys. I think about, I hope that it's my earnest hope that I can help both young men and women, but just help a lot of the younger people. I'm only 26, but help the generations after me, including my own children, when I have some someday, is I just want to help them accept themselves and be willing to go try things until they kind of get an understanding of not only who they are, but what they enjoy, but also figuring themselves out and making that as easy for people as possible. That you've got this shining light of the true you inside yourself. And once you have that, follow that torch, right? That inner fire in your gut, right? Not just follow your heart, follow your gut, follow your intuition, right? Or that second brain almost is, right? You follow that deep person inside you, that you're, in a sense, your conscience, right? Not like just this magical voice or like a demonic voice of just something in your head, but like I said, in your gut, where the true you's in there, and you kind of, I think intuitively you kind of know what you need to do, but sometimes you need to go through a lot of experiences to kind of be able to distill that or figure that out. And then as you get more information on yourself and the world, you're able to make those decisions. But it's I think of the words of Brandon Sanderson, who wrote Mistborn. He said in a lecture, he said, as you kind of go out in the world, it's just a lot of it is, it's just figuring out how you work. And because you don't have an operating manual on yourself, and you most certainly don't have an operating manual on life or other people, but the one person you can figure out is yourself. And you figure out what kind of person you are. Like, be really truthful and honest. You're going to see things about yourself you don't necessarily like, but you figure out your flaws, and you figure out what you resonate with and like how you function the best, and what becomes of that, right? Like, one thing I notice about myself as a creative producer, that I usually start, like, I have to feed my brain, like it's like a fiction tank, like I was saying earlier, right? I have to feed myself fiction, I have to feed myself storytelling, I have to feed myself movies, and books, for example, fiction books like stories on myths, getting ideas for stories until finally it's just like, oh, yep, time to write, and the brain just takes off like fire, and you just start writing. But once you kind of know your process, you can kind of trust it as you kind of go on. But it's it really is a process of figuring yourself out, and sometimes it takes, sometimes people have themselves figured out when they're 18 or 15 or 12. Sometimes people have themselves figured out at 62. It's a process, I think, and I think a lot of us want to. I mean, speaking from personal experience, I think a lot of people, we kind of put pressure on people, or we. I know a lot of pressure was put on me to figure myself out, and I think a lot of it was, I think I put it on myself, but I just hurry up and figure out what you want to do and go do it. And I think it's taken a lot of time to do that. I know there's a lot of contentment within me right now, just for example, but it is nice once you have that framework. You can kind of just build off of that, but until you do, it's really freaking hard. But if there are any viewers today who are kind of struggling with that self acceptance, just speaking from a little personal experience, if you can be patient with it and you surround yourself with people that you really resonate with, it gets a lot easier. Once you kind of fill up your mind with more truth about who you are and what you want to do with your life, and what you just basically just what interests you, right? It's the way Chesterton put it. Like, everyone's trying to make their souls fit to something out here, when the reality is the things out here should fit to your souls, right? You make the world fit to not just your needs, right? But that the world is, it's not that your soul is malleable and the world is rigid and solid. It's just the opposite. You can only do what you're interested in. You can't go do what you want to go do in life. You can't just do anything you want to do. You have to do what interests you. You have to do what gives you energy. If you're if you get energy by being an accountant, man, and doing taxes, you have to do that. If you get energy being an actor, you have to do that, right? It's what you breathe. It's what you can't live without, or you have to do to breathe, or like breathing. It's comparable to breathing or eating, but all this stuff is kind of just stuff I've learned over the last 5 or 6 years, and it's been nice. It's been nice kind of learning this and kind of getting to a point of that self acceptance. But I mentioned all that stuff. I do kind of wish I had a couple jokes lined up, but I guess we're more of a thoughtful mood this evening, children. Yes. We'll have another more sip of our Jameson whiskey. Yes. I'll tell you, want to know something that pisses me off though? It's freaking lockdown bullcrap. Look, I know that there's a virus out there. I get that. I'm not denying there's a virus out there. But for sake, like, when people are sick, you lock up who's sick, right? You isolate who's sick. You don't just lock up. You don't just tell uh the healthy, like, you have to stay locked up, like, stay in your home. So you have to stay in. There's only we'll have restrictions on what you can and can't do. I'm sick of wearing masks. I'm sick of wearing not being able to go to the gym when I want to. I'm sick of these stupid hours. I'm sick of not being able to go to the pub. I'm sick and tired of not being able to go swimming for sake, and not being able to go to the hot tub. It's like it's so asinine. Number one, that it's like this gigantic scam. It's what it genuinely feels like. That it feels like there's this prearranged thing, like, oh, you see, we have a vaccine, but oh, there's a new strain now, so you have to keep the masks on. Or oh, just when you think everything's gonna start turning back to the way it was, which, remember the way it was, don't forget it. They don't want you to remember the way it was. But, like, oh, it's like, oh, we can't open your business now, oh, your business isn't working now. That's too bad. It's like, F you, man. It's like you're killing small businesses, and it's like you're looking for excuses just to keep locking it down because you think it's funny. That's what it just comes across that way. People wonder why I want to leave a blue state. It's like, I'm sick and freaking tired of not just the high taxes. I'm sick of that, but just, like, I'm sick of just this arbitrary. It feels genuinely arbitrary. And I'm like, okay, first of all, I don't listen to, like, mainstream media outlets, so I'm not panicked. Walt, I don't know who the F you listen to on the regular basis, but if you're listening to CNN, they're just going to create a bunch of mass panic for you to keep the state locked down. It wouldn't surprise me if Biden does indeed get in, which looks like it, that we're just going to do a gigantic lockdown sometime in the early few months of his presidency, or do it sometime in the summer and then there's going to be a lot more mass panic about it, and you're going to see a lot of America. I'm calling it now. There's going to be not just mass panic about the masks, right? There's not going to be just that. It's also new strain, and you have to keep a mask on all the time. You have to wear gloves, and you can't go out. And it's like, oh, we have to keep ratcheting it down. It's like, I'm calling it now. Here's what I'm calling right now. There's going to be a giant mass lockdown, and in some places you may not be allowed to go to the grocery store. Maybe you will. I don't know. But there's going to be a mass lockdown by Biden if he gets in. If he does, all this issue with voter fraud, if that doesn't get resolved. The Republicans would if they grow a spine, which they more than likely won't. Maybe Trump would have a shot. I don't know. But the thing is that if Biden gets in, I'm picturing a long mass lockdown. I'm picturing a lot more riots and a lot more civil unrest. And I'm picturing that Black Lives Matter is going to make a comeback, and Antifa is going to make a comeback. Like, there's going to be someone shot in the summer, and Black Lives Matter and Antifa are going to riot, and they're going to run around like crazy because a lot of the police forces in these big cities are going to be heavily defunded. Which I really sincerely think they're going to. It's going to be a momentum thing. Like, it's going to start in a couple cities, and then they're all going to start doing it slowly over a few years. And I'm also picturing false flag terrorist attacks where what the Dems are going to do, they're going to say radical Trump supporters, radical militias, or they're going to say these 1776 patriots or these MAGA guys, they're actually white supremacist Nazis, and they're conducting bombings, and they're violently attacking us, and they're terrorizing us, and so therefore we need to have violent crackdowns on them from the police state. And they're going to not just demonize Trump supporters. I'm not not only that, they're also going to. I've got a feeling it's basically people are gonna be scared, not just to leave their homes, but people are gonna be scared of supporting Trump or anything. They're gonna make Trump seem like a 4-letter word, like he's literally Hitler. They're gonna talk about how terrible of a job Trump did, but I'm expecting a lot of, like, not only just the false flag stuff, to justify more not just justify more lockdowns, but justify persecution of Trump supporters, especially in government. Pro-Trump people. So I don't think things are going to get better, and I think that they've effectively normalized the masks enough where I don't think people are going to fight back enough. If there's a point where people say we've had enough, we're done with this, we're tired of wearing masks, we're tired of all this crap, which you should. I'm sick of it. But my whole point, I'll probably start closing with this, is that they have to keep you in a state of fear so you don't push back at the coming tyranny we're going to start seeing, I think, in politics over the next several years. To what extent, I don't know what that looks like. I think we're going to see higher taxes. I think we're going to see a lot of radical left agendas being pushed not only on Biden, but Biden's handlers who control him, or I think are going to be pushing for that too. And I'm not optimistic. I don't, and as an individual on the ground, I'm kind of just thinking to myself, like, I don't know what I can do, but I'll find something. Podcast is a way to at least talk about it a bit. I'm gonna scoosh up. Talk about these issues, but it's frustrating because you just feel so helpless. I certainly feel just helpless with all this political upheaval, my mistake. But it's I just wish I could do more. And let's see what happens on January 6th. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what Trump's plan is. I don't know what anyone's plans are. But that is one thing that I think that we're going to see, like 1984 style stuff, like not just surveillance, but justification of persecuting conservatives to some degree. To what extent, I don't know. But they're going to paint them like they're Nazis. I really think they're going to do that. And they're not going to hold any punches. Like, if you think it was bad, like what they did to Trump, they're going to start doing that to conservatives. Hopefully I'm wrong, Hopefully I'm not being prophetic. I'm like, oh, I hope I'm overreacting and everything's okay. And Biden turns out to be a moderate president. I sincerely doubt that. But hey, maybe I'm wrong. And I'd like to be wrong on some of this stuff because I've read a good portion of the biography on Stalin and what it's like living under state terror in the Soviet Union, for example. And I know what state terror looks like from a lot of the accounts in communist China. So it's not going to be fun. And it's going to be really, really horrific for a long time. I'm concerned it will be. I hope not. I hope they're not just arbitrarily shutting off power to certain regions or certain parts of the country. I sincerely hope not, but when you have sociopaths running the government, when they just worship power at all costs, what can you do, right? So it's disparaging, and it's what's the phrase? You feel just so helpless. You feel like a drop in the great big rainstorm, but personally, I'm just going to keep praying about it and asking God what he wants me to do on it and see if I can get some clarity from him. So I think it probably wraps up this week. Moving forward, I think with my next paycheck, I'm going to be purchasing a upgraded webcam, and I'm going to be in the process of slowly upgrading the quality on my end of our shoots and seeing, improving that in that regard. So stay tuned for that. I'm going to talk to Mike about improving some of our formats for our thumbnails on YouTube. We'll see. It's probably going to take some work. I might need to draw them. But yeah, thanks for watching, folks. Really appreciate it a lot. Please comment, share, like, do anything you can. Share this podcast with people. Feedback, positive, negative, I want to hear it. Post it in the comments. Tell me what you liked. Tell me what you disliked. And tell me what what worked and what didn't. And we'll take that. I just want to make the best podcast for you. So just tell me how I did, and we're going to do better moving forward. But, who knows? Maybe in like a few years we can launch a Patreon or something. But for now, it's all free stuff, and we're just going to keep releasing it for free. No any plan. Maybe we'll sell a t-shirt. But we're only at episode 6, so it's way too early talking about that. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I hope you guys have a very pleasant evening. And thanks for making this possible, because we wouldn't be here without you. So bless you guys. Mike will be back next week. I'm going to kick his ass. Better bleep that out, Mike, but I'm going to kick your ass. But yeah, it's good stuff. So thanks for listening. I really appreciate it a lot. And in the future, we have had some talks about having some guests on. So stay tuned for that. We'll find out the best time to do that as we kind of get our feet settled on how the podcast format works out. But I really love you guys. I really appreciate you. And I hope you come away with the feeling that I'm here for you. I'm trying to make a show that's entertaining for you, that you enjoy. It's not about me. I know I can pretend to be egotistical at times, but it's about you. And I want to kind of create that feeling and grow that feeling after the show. So thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and I hope you guys have a very pleasant evening. God bless, and take care. So thank you so much.
Hey folks, if you liked what you saw, be sure to follow us on Facebook and now on Parler. God bless.